I'm going to go over exercise 19 and what you need to do to complete this assignment. So for the first question here, I have, according to the relevant study results section of the Darling-Fisher et al. Study, what categories are reported to be statistically significant? So here you just need to look at the relevant study results section and find which categories are statistically significant. And we're going to determine that by comparing the p-value that's reported to the significance level of the study. Remember, if they don't give a specific significance level, use alpha equal 0.05 as your level of significance. Number 2, what level of measurement is appropriate for calculating the chi-square statistic? So this is asking what level of measurement of data we would use chi-square for. So here are our measurement scales or levels of measurement. We have nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So it's going to be one of these types of measurements. So which one is chi-square used for? And then the second part of this wants you to give 2 examples from table 2 of demographic variables. So those are our background or descriptive variables of the study sample, were measured at the level appropriate for chi-square. So you have to pick which level of measurement chi-square is measured at, and then find 2 examples of variables that are measured at that measurement level. So they're that type of data. Number 3, what is the chi-square for US practice region? Okay, so we're going to look at the results and find what they reported as the chi-square result. And then, is this value statistically significant? So to determine this, you're going to look at the p-value and make sure to say yes or no if it's significant, but also tell me what you base that decision on. What did you compare that p-value to determine whether or not it was significant? Number 4, what is the degrees of freedom for provider type? Provide a rationale for why the degrees of freedom for provider type presented in Table 2 is correct. So they give you a degrees of freedom in Table 2, so you need to go and find what that is. And then this is just wanting you to understand that there's different formulas for degrees of freedom for chi-square. So when we have a one sample chi-square, we have our degrees of freedom is equal to the number of categories minus 1. So one sample would just be a very simple table. We're just looking at one variable. If we have that 2 by 2 table, so we have multiple rows and multiple columns of data, that's a 2 sample chi-square. And here our degrees of freedom would be equal to the number of rows minus 1 times the number of columns minus 1. So you look at how many rows of data there are, put that number here. Look at how many columns of data there are, put that number here, and then just solve this problem to figure out the degrees of freedom. So just go ahead and work through that yourself and just make sure that they had the right answer there. Number 5, is there a statistically significant difference for practice setting between the rapid assessment for adolescent preventive services users and non-users? Provide a rationale for your answer. So to determine if there's a statistically significant difference, we're going to look at the p-value for the result and make sure you tell me what you compared that to and how you made that decision. So we compare the p-value to the level of significance, right? So make sure you tell me that, and then if you think it's significant, why? Is the p-value lower or higher? What do we want that to be in relation to the level of significance? Number 6, state the null hypothesis for provider in years, for age in years for RAPS users and RAPS non-users. Okay, so our null hypothesis is that there's not going to be a difference, right? That's usually what our null hypothesis is. With chi-square, sometimes we phrase that a little bit differently, but because we're looking for the difference between those 2 groups to see if there's a difference in the age, we can just phrase it the way we usually do. Number 7, should the null hypothesis for provider age in years developed for question 6 be accepted or rejected? So we want to know if we're going to reject the null hypothesis. And to determine that, we're going to look at the p-value, and you're going to compare that to the level of significance. So make sure you tell me how you came to that conclusion. If you compared the p-value to the level of significance, then are you looking for it to be lower, or are you looking for it to be higher in order to reject the null hypothesis? Number 8, describe at least one clinical advantage and clinical challenge of using RAPS as described by Darling, Fisher et al. So they report some of these in the text, so look back at the results that are reported and the discussion that they have, and just identify one of the clinical advantages and the disadvantages to using that program. Number 9, how many null hypotheses are rejected in this study? So we're going to look at table 2, and this is just another way of looking at the p-value and the significance. So if the p-value is statistically significant, the null hypothesis would be rejected. So we're going to look at table 2, and you're going to see which of those have significant results, and those would be the hypotheses that would be rejected. So look and see how many were rejected, and also tell me how you made that decision. What did you compare the p-value to, and were you looking for the p-value to be lower or higher in order to reject the null hypothesis? Number 10, a statistically significant difference is present between RAPS users and RAPS non-users for US practice region. This chi-square result is equal to 29.68. Does the chi-square result provide the location of difference? Provide a rationale for your answer. So this is just a little bit of a strange way of asking if this tells you exactly what the difference is. So this result is statistically significant, but is it telling us that there's a difference between the groups, or is it telling us exactly what the difference is between the groups? Okay, so we talked about this in lecture, and some of our tests, like the F test, only tell us that there's a difference. They don't tell us exactly what the difference is. A t-test will tell us exactly what the difference is, if it's greater or if it's less than between the two groups. So you need to just look back at your notes and the chi-square. Does this tell us only that there's a difference, or can it actually pinpoint what the difference is? And go ahead and just give me a few sentences explanation for what chi-square is doing and whether or not it's able to provide the exact difference between the groups. And that's what we need to do for exercise 19. You can type your questions or your answers into this document that I've prepared, or you can always type them into your own Word document if you'd like to.